Moving on to the team, the last team in the division, last team of the night. Cincinnati Bengals went 4-11-1 last year. Here are the losses. AJ Green finally left. John Ross, former first round pick, also left. Giovanni Bernard, uh, left as well. Center BJ Finney, like I mentioned, went to Pittsburgh. Lost cornerback William Jackson III, very good underrated corner. Edge rusher Carl Lawson, who actually tore his Achilles the other day, so unfortunate for him. And then also defensive lineman Geno Atkins, Green Bay, please sign him. He's still out there. Lost him as well. Added on though, tackle Riley Reef, who we mentioned, from the Vikings. Safety Ricardo Allen, cornerback Mike Hilton, former Dallas guy Chidobe Awuzie also added him. Larry Ogunjobi signed Trey Hendrickson from the Saints to a good contract after he had a good year. And then draft wise, got Jamar Chase, who seems to be having some issues in camp. And then also second round addressed offensive line again with Jackson Carman, who I thought was pretty solid, and could be kind of a steal there. So all right, John, it's Joe Burrow still unsure about that ACL. He still doesn't seem to be 100%. Jamar Chase is struggling, and then obviously Zach Taylor is on the hot seat. What do you expect out of the Bengals this year?
I think they could improve, but it's just a really hard division. I still think they're going to be the worst team in the division. They lack just a lot of depth across the board. They signed my guy Chidobe Awuzie, and that kind of sucked to see him leave the Cowboys. And I feel like they kind of overpaid for him. I think he's a solid cornerback, but not a number one. And he kind of got paid like it. So anyway, just overall, I don't think losing any of the guys that they did really hurt them because a lot of those guys are sort of older. Giovanni Bernard, been there for a long time. John Ross never really turned into anything. AJ Green, been there for a long time, older guy. Geno Atkins, same thing. Except for maybe William Jackson. I think that one probably hurt him a little bit, but overall it was pay him or he's going to walk, and they didn't want to pay him. Yeah. I was surprised when they paid Chidobe as much as they did because it just felt like, okay, you could probably just keep William Jackson.
Yeah.
But if I'm thinking correctly, I think they did technically get Chidobe Awuzie for cheaper than William Jackson was. So anyway, the additions they had, Trey Hendrickson, I feel like was overpaid too.
Yeah.
He did have a solid year sack wise last year, but I'm always wary of. Yeah, I'm also just wary of those guys who put up big sack numbers across from an elite pass rusher. Obviously, Cameron Jordan's on the other side of that defensive line, and he's just been doing it for so long that we know how good he is. And we saw it with the Chicago Bears, right? Like for the Dallas Cowboys, they had Robert Quinn. He was opposite of DeMarcus Lawrence. DeMarcus Lawrence 2 years ago did not have the best sack numbers, but his pass rush win rate, all these kind of things were top 10. So he was still performing at an elite level, just wasn't finishing. Meanwhile, on the other end, Robert Quinn, I think, had 12 and a half, 13 and a half sacks.
Digits, I remember.
It was in the double digits. I think it was 13 and a half, which is a lot, right? And so people think, wow, that's his second best sack total since the year that he had 20, I think it was. And he led the league when he was on the Rams. So people thought that, man, he's bounced back and he got a big contract from the Bears. And last year he didn't do as well. And so I think that Trey Hendrickson could be one of those guys. Now he's a lot younger than Robert Quinn, so maybe this was sort of him finally getting used to the NFL. But yeah, overall, like you said, I don't think he's an amazing run defender, and I am wary of the guys who put up the big SAG numbers and then get paid for it because I said this when we talked about our defensive line rankings. I think sacks it's just a really overrated stat. Because I think somebody else could create the disruption, but you might be the guy who finishes it. You're the one who's going to get the credit for it, which I just think it's dumb. Because fans, they just look at sack numbers when in reality, like Aaron Donald, how many times has he even led the league in sacks? But we all know that Aaron Donald is the best, right? So anyway, overall, I don't know. The Bengals are the Bengals. They didn't have a terrible offseason. I don't like when young teams like that who are trying to rebuild do overpay for certain guys like they did. But you can't complain. They had tons of cap space to spend. So we'll see how it works out for them. They're still a few years away from really competing, especially with how talented this division is. Um, I mean, you know how high I was on Jamar Chase, but I still think that it was a mistake to not take Penei Sewell just because of the state of that offensive line, Joe Burrow, how he got hurt. And also, I think T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd are really good. And I think Jamar Chase is solid too. But I was even pissed when my Cowboys did it and they took CeeDee Lamb. And I know that was a little different because it was best available, right? They're at 18, and all of a sudden this guy who looked like a top 10 guy gets, all the way there. And you had so many spots that you could take that you go there. I didn't feel like the Bengals were in a best available kind of position. It felt like they had a massive need on the offensive line. There was a guy who looks like he's going to be the next great offensive lineman in the draft. They pass on him and they get a receiver who they're already really, really good at. So we'll see how it works out long term. Maybe Joe Burrow was an influencing factor in that decision because we know they played in college. But if Jackson Carman can become a solid lineman, maybe Riley Reeve helps shore up the offensive line issues, then maybe we'll look back and say that they made the right move. But yeah, I think they should take Penei Sewell, especially since not sold on Jonah Williams as of yet. I don't know much about Jackson Carman, Riley Reef. We know what he is. So yeah, I still think the offensive line is going to be a struggle for them, and they're going to be playing from behind quite a bit this year. So might marginally improve, but not a ton.
Yeah, I'm really worried. I've heard Pro Football talk about this, and they make good points. I'm really worried about Joe Burrow because he doesn't seem to be 100. ACL game. He's not 100% back. With the ACL, it seems like, and I think it's more mentally than physically. And there's conflicting timelines. Joe Burrow's only coming into his second year. Might be thrown to the wolves, and then Zach Taylor on the other hand, he's kind of on the hot seat. So I feel like there's a little bit of pressure from him on his team, even though it's still a relatively young-ish team, a lot of moving parts. Like I mentioned, they just lost a bunch of key pieces that have been there for years, and brought in a bunch of guys. So. I hope for Jamar Chase, and I expect him to figure it out. Get back, get right again. Like we mentioned, we were messaging. You made the good point. He didn't play college football last year, even too. So it's no matter how much you work out, it's just nothing's really going to prepare you for the NFL, for football, tackle football, unless you're playing tackle football. So it may take him a few weeks, but like I said, just something to watch for Joe Burrow. Watch him. Yeah, I feel like because one of his biggest attributes too was how he's not a guy that's going to tuck and run, but he was like the Drew Brees, is like the Tom Brady's, where he knew how to manipulate the pocket, slide, just step away just enough from pressure to make the throw and such. And I'm worried that with coming off the ACL, that he may not be as confident, or maybe as confident in doing so, and maybe he looks down, at the line more now, and instead of looking downfield, he's going to miss targets. So regardless, though, yeah, I don't expect this Bengal team to be great. I wouldn't be surprised if they're 4-13, worse than last year's record, and Zach Taylor's gone. So, but maybe with more of these pieces they added for the offensive line, they can get Joe Mixon going, and then maybe that'll open up his offense because he is from the Sean McVay coaching tree, and who is from Kyle Shanahan, which strong emphasis on the run game first, and then build your pass game off that. So, excuse me. So we'll see how the Bengals do, but like I said, we all don't expect much from them, even though they got their fancy New Jerseys. But yeah, that will end. That's going to wrap up this episode. That was the AFC and NFC North, and the wide receiver / running back rankings. Did a lot. Not going to do an episode like this for a while. Next time, from here on out, we're just going to do one at a time. I think next week we will be doing AFC East first. Next week, early, mid next week, and then next weekend we will be doing NFC East and then our season predictions. So as the season gets closer, we're getting right there, wrapping this all up. We almost have everything done. So once again, thank you everyone for your support, whether it be on the rankings, just the post in general. John's been killing on Instagram, like I mentioned. Now we're over 2,000 followers, which I think only a month ago we were like at 1,000. So it's climbing fast. We're gonna try to get those numbers also elsewhere. If you're watching on YouTube, wherever you're just watching or listening, like I mentioned every time, like, comment, subscribe, leave and just give us a shout, give us a follow. Instagram's up there. TikTok's over there. TikTok handles same thing as the Twitter handle, and we have a Facebook page, Shut Up and Ball. So that's gonna wrap it up for us tonight. Hope everyone enjoys the last weekend of preseason. Good luck in your fantasy drafts, and just have a nice weekend, everybody.